I'd like to introduce our next speaker, as I mentioned a few moments ago, Dr. Peter Sheard. He's going to be delivering a course on halal compliance. Now, Dr. Sheard ran an MSc Meat Science course at the University of Bristol for over 20 years, and before that he worked as a former meat researcher at the Meat Research Institute. He holds a BSc in food processing technology, and has published a number of scientific papers across a wide range of topics. So please do put your hands together for Dr. Peter Sheard.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see so many here this afternoon. I hope you can hear me at the back. My voice doesn't project too well. I think you'll agree we've had a really good day so far. One thing it's shown me for sure, that the world of halal is large, it's complex, and it's changing as well. So we've talked about additives, we've talked about certification, we've talked about slaughter, stun slaughter and non-stun slaughter. Now I want to turn your thoughts to training. You're all familiar with, I'm trying to use this pointer, I'm not sure if it will, there we go. You're all familiar with the HFA, the Halal Food Authority, who've organised today's event. You're probably less familiar with the Halal Food Foundation. So similar names, but quite different really. So the Halal Food Foundation, as we said right at the start today, it has a charitable status, and its aim and its vision is to educate and inform the public. That's a big ask, isn't it? Educating the public about halal. I think it was Rizvan this morning who reminded us that halal is much bigger than meat. It's much bigger than the diet in general. Halal is about a way of life, it's clothing, and it's work life as well. So that's what they're concerned with. Training. So halal compliance training fits in very well with what the Halal Food Foundation are trying to do. That's the foundation. Just a little bit about myself. So I ran a meat science course at the University of Bristol for over 20 years, since 1990. It's a course that covers the whole food chain. So we start from animal production and go right through to eating quality. It includes animal welfare as well. It also includes an in-depth research project. And I'm pleased to say that a number of those projects were halal related. I'm just looking around the audience today, and I think there's probably at least four people who have done that particular course. I think I finished at the university last October, but I think we started talking about training with the HFA and the Halal Food Foundation about this time last year. And what the Halal Food Foundation wanted to do was to set up a halal training academy here in the UK. That sounds grand, doesn't it? They recognised that there were some well-established training courses overseas, but not very much in the UK. So, what have we done so far? We've got a 2-day halal compliance training course, which is really a generic course. So it's not aimed particularly at the meat industry or any other part of the meat industry. So it covers production. It can be tailored to the food service, for example. But you notice it's interactive. So we're going to keep the group size quite small, less than 20 people. So we'll have discussion groups, video clips, and try and engage in dialogue. And I'm sure there'll be lots of heated dialogue. That's approved by, most of you I think will recognise the CIEH, the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health. Some of you might have done their food hygiene courses, so they've approved that course. It will issue in a certificate, so there will be an end-of-course assessment, which I'm sure everybody will pass with flying colours. But we're aiming that really, I suppose, at the halal management team. So anybody involved in producing halal food, be it production, be it on the packaging side, that's the kind of level we're aiming at. The next course is 2nd and 3rd of June, which will be held here in London. I'll be involved in delivering that, and that will be delivered with staff from the HFA and also the HFA's Scholar Board. So that course addresses some basic questions, really. So what is Islam? What do Muslims believe? What is Sharia law? What's Sharia law based on? How many Muslims are there in the world? How many are there in Europe? How many are in the UK? So what is Islam? We'll have a look at the terms. I don't think we've mentioned this morning haram and mashbu, although the meanings have been. So one of the speakers this morning said there are 3,000 food additives. So you find them in virtually every food that you eat, other than, I suppose, things like fruit and vegetables which haven't been processed. But of those 3,000, which are halal, which are permissible, which are haram, which are forbidden, and which are mashbu, which are doubtful, which aren't we sure about? So, for example, emulsifiers, you find them in everything from, I don't know, chewing gum to breakfast cereals. If they've been obtained from an animal that hasn't been slaughtered in a halal way, then it will be haram. If you just look at a food packaging, at the label, you cannot tell from the food label whether that particular ingredient is halal or haram. So it's doubtful. So the majority of our additives are in fact doubtful. So what is religious slaughter? So we'll just ask the basic question, how does halal slaughter differ from conventional slaughter? What are the main requirements? What are some of the additional requirements? And how does halal slaughter differ from kosher slaughter? What about labelling? Should halal meat be labelled? Opinions divided. Anybody got any views on that? Should halal meat be labelled? I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Yes, if you're in favour of halal meat being labelled in the UK. Come on, be brave. Should halal meat be labelled? Okay. And let's put the question the other way. Okay, those of you who think halal meat shouldn't be labelled. Oh, okay, the minority. Opinions obviously divided. And what about other halal food? Should that be labelled and made clear to consumers? I wasn't going to ask for a show of hands for that one, but you're showing me anyway. Great. So what do we mean by compliance? How is it achieved? I guess many of you in your businesses will have total quality management systems. Well, how does a halal total quality management system differ from a conventional TQM? Or how does halal HACCP differ from a conventional HACCP? So those are the kind of questions we'll be asking. And we'll also talk about halal fraud and enforcement as well. So this is another course, a one-day course. It's obviously going to take an international perspective rather than a UK perspective. There are something like 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide. That's 23% of the world's population. So if you think about that, on average, 1 in every 4 or 5 people you meet in the world you would expect to be Muslim. How big's the halal market? Well, if you think of it in terms of 23%, I suppose you won't be too far off, though of course it does depend on affluence as well. The global market's worth this is difficult to get your head around the numbers, $1.1 trillion, if you can get your head around those noughts. It's a big market, and it's a growing market. The Muslim population is growing, as we heard this morning. So that's expected to grow to $1.6 trillion by 2018. So we'll look, in this course, we'll look at the big markets, Asia-Pacific region. We'll look at the Arabic-speaking countries in the Middle East and in North Africa. We'll look at sub-Saharan Africa as well. We'll look at some of the global certification schemes. So we heard about one of them this morning. We'll talk about the OIC SMIC standards. We'll look at the Malaysian standards and the Indonesian standards, which obviously play a very big part in the Asia-Pacific market. So that's the global side of things. This is where we get a bit more controversial. So as far as the general public's concerned, non-stun slaughter in particular is high profile, controversial, and poorly understood, I think, by the general public. So this course we'll talk about mainly focus on sheep. We'll also look at cattle as well. The main concern, as far as the general public's concerned, is non-stun slaughter. Of course, not all animals, halal killed animals, are not stunned before slaughter. So these are the numbers. In the UK, we have 5 minutes left. In the UK, we slaughter 14 million sheep per annum. About 40% of those are halal slaughtered. And of those, 63% are stunned before slaughter. So we'll look at the compliance with national legislation, European legislation. As I say, we'll focus on sheep, but we'll look at cattle as well. Cattle numbers slaughtered are much lower, 4% or lower in the UK. So that's a one-day course aimed at the red meat industry. Then we've got an equivalent course aimed at the white meat industry. So again, we'll look at stun slaughter and non-stun slaughter. There are two major requirements for halal slaughter, so using stunning. So it must be recoverable, and blood loss is important as well. So we'll look at both those issues, and we'll look at some of the stunning requirements for poultry in terms of recoverability. So what frequency current combinations do you need? In the UK, we kill something like 900 million poultry. That includes 18 million turkeys, 42 million spent hens. So it's a big industry. This is what we're working on at the moment. We'd like to run a one-day course aimed at halal slaughtermen. It's not a glamorous role, but it is vital for welfare, and it's important for the halal industry as well to be seen to be doing all the right things. So either a one-day course or maybe two half days, covering off principles and also practice. So that's where we are. If you want further details on the training, you'll find them on the HFA website. We've got the first course coming up. I put the dates up earlier and I can't remember them. First week in June. So if any of those sounds like they might be useful for your business or some of your colleagues, then please get in touch. And I think that was less than 15 minutes.
Thank you very much.